Fair, accurate, to the point. This is Face the State on Montana's news station.
Good morning and welcome to Face the State. I'm Jay Cohn. Well, if you were watching the Montana Television Network last night, we treated you to a one-hour debate in the House race between Ryan Zinke and John Lewis, the first face-to-face televised debate of this congressional campaign. Hopefully you were watching, but if not, Sanjay Tawani was covering the debate for the MTN network. Let's take a look at his report.
The candidates didn't agree on much, and they took aim at each other's positions in a race to enter a Congress with a single-digit approval rating.
I read somewhere that cockroaches and root canals have a higher standing than 9%. Root canals.
I've sat down with warlords and agreed back and forth on solutions. I can certainly sit down between Democrats and Republicans, as I did in the Senate, to find real solutions.
We've released plans for agriculture, for energy, for public lands, and that's what I want to see Congress do, is work on solutions to move Montana forward.
And they took shots at some of each other's campaign statements.
Your plan about selling used cars and abandoned buildings and cutting congressional pay is a joke.
This is somebody who called for invading Mexico a few weeks ago because we have an American in jail in Tijuana.
They showed their differences, starting with ISIS and Iraq.
The idea that we can just bomb our way out of this problem is not realistic to me. We need to be thoughtful about our approach. And number one, Congress needs to debate this issue.
Unfortunately, it's going to call for America to lead. And you cannot control ISIS by air alone. In the words of General Conway, four-star, former Commandant of the Marine Corps, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that air operations will work.
But neither said how they would pay for another war.
It's a good question, Jay. How much is this going to cost? And it needs to be debated in Congress and authorized.
We pay for it by having a strong economy.
Another topic, Zinke's ad that takes aim at Lewis's young age and his lengthy time as a staffer to Senator Max Baucus.
Bring up a comparison of two lives, and it's a positive campaign. I've had a lot of experience. I've done a lot of things in my life.
My experience is very relevant to what we're trying to do here. I've worked on legislation in D.C., helping veterans. I've worked on issues right here in Montana. I've been to all 56 counties. This election is about the future, what ideas you have for the future, not what you were doing in the 80s and 90s.
On Obamacare, Zinke acknowledged a lot of good in the law, but still said it's a sinking ship that needs to be abandoned.
And when a naval officer is abandoned a ship, he doesn't jump in the ocean. We make sure that you go to a safer, smaller, more stable vessel.
We need to continue to improve the healthcare system, not go backwards and jump ship when there's no plan to ensure more Americans.
And finally, they laid out the basics of what they think the campaign is about.
If you want a show horse in this race, then Mr. Zinke is your guy. If you want a workhorse, then I'm your guy.
This election is about whether you think the policies of Barack Hussein Obama are correct. It is.
There's a woman on this panel who has a pre-existing condition. What about that? Would you do anything with that? That's one of the big parts of Obamacare that people were concerned about, to cover folks who have a pre-existing condition.
Yeah, Don, I agree on pre-existing conditions, and I've toured around Montana, and there are a lot of people that had pre-existing conditions that couldn't leave the job because if they did, they couldn't get insurance on the next job. So I agree. That's a very good part. But what happens in Obamacare in a few years when 14% is a raise in home health care? This is, Montana's an aging population. What happens when Medicare payments are reduced? What happens to our urgent care facilities when we don't have the premium on Medicare? So there's a lot of issues in Montana that don't fit a model of Washington, D.C. or larger urban states. And Montana's rural. And we forget the power base of this country is on the west and east coast. And what about Montana? What about Wyoming? What about South and North Dakota? We're rural, and we have to protect our rural interests, and I think we can do it better. But there wasn't one Republican vote on Obamacare. It was done at night, and Nancy Pelosi was right. We don't know what's in it until we vote on it, and until we pass it, and that's not right. And I think we can do better. And I don't view life through a red lens or a blue lens. I view life through a red, white, and blue lens, and I think we can do it better.
So just to follow up. Go ahead, John.
There were no solutions there about healthcare. What I heard was all the problems we have in the healthcare system. I didn't hear one idea about solving the healthcare crisis we have in this country. And look, I'm somebody that's solution-oriented and is going to be focused on that if I'm fortunate enough to serve.
In Bozeman, Sanjay Talwani, MTN News.
Well, thank you very much, Sanjay. Immediately following the debate Saturday night, we had a chance to sit down and analyze what we just saw. Joining us, Montana State University political science professor David Parker, and our panel of journalists from the MTN network, Donna Kelly, Jill Valley, and Janelle Slade. Take a look. We're on the heels of the first and only televised debate here in Montana's House race. That debate, the 1-hour affair, just concluding minutes ago here at the Riverside Country Club in Bozeman. I'm Jay Cohn, the moderator of that debate, and I'm joined here on stage as we analyze what we just heard by David Parker, the the Montana Television Network political analyst, but a political science professor at Montana State University. David, thanks for sharing your expertise with us. And of course, our panel, if you're just joining us, who did an excellent job asking Ryan Zinke and John Lewis probing questions, Donna Kelly, Jill Valley, and Janelle Slade. Let's start with you, Dave Parker. Your initial reaction to what we just heard. What did you think?
You know, one of the things I look for in a debate is I want to see exchanges where the candidates are going back and forth against each other and talking issues. I was much happier with this debate than other debates I've seen since I've been here in Montana. So I was really pleased with the debate, and I thought, in some ways, both the candidates won in that they survived. That's what the campaigns want to do, is they want to survive. So at the very least, by that bar, they both acquitted themselves fairly well.
And compare this debate to the debate on the radio earlier this week. I guess it gave voters in Montana a double shot to hear both of these candidates. There was some audio issues in the radio debate, but it did get replayed. Just how did this one contrast with the previous one from Billings earlier this week?
So I listened to that debate, and I thought that Lewis came out a little bit ahead in terms of substantive issue discussion. But that said, I thought the debate was not terribly fun or interesting. I think this one was far more lively, and there was definitely a lot more friction between the two candidates, which I think is good for the voters, frankly.
I'm glad you thought it was fun. Let's get some comments and our analysis. Janelle.
So on that note, pick two topics, and who won which topics?
So I think one of the things that I've followed in this race is this notion of the out-of-state contributions, right? And this is the charge that Lewis has made against Zinke over and over and over again. I've always thought it's a weird charge, especially since you look at the Senate race. And I thought the question was good. And I think Zinke came out ahead of that. Why? Because I think he had a very compelling response that says, look, I've got a broad base of support. And not only that, a lot of those people are veterans in other places as well as here in Montana. On the environment, the issue that went back and forth with John Lewis and Ryan Zinke. Ryan Zinke mentioned that global warming and human contribution is not settled science. I'd like him to go ask a bunch of my colleagues at Montana State. And by the way, my science colleagues certainly cannot necessarily be called liberal, and I think they believe it's settled science. So I think on that exchange, John Lewis came out better.
Donna, what did you think? You asked a good personality question at the end, who they would thank, who they would blame, but your question on Social Security was a personal one for you.
Yes, because I'm getting closer to that age, and so I was, personally interested in that. I thought it was interesting, though. I hadn't heard Lewis say before that he would have you continue to pay in, and it sounded like, even when I said to him, forever, and he said, well, yeah. But then he said that he wouldn't change some things either. So I think there was still a little bit of confusion on the board there.
Jill, you asked the question actually from one of our viewers on the Affordable Care Act, and I guess we'll ask David how he thought both candidates did on that. What was your reaction to what you heard?
There's so many unanswered questions going on still with the Affordable Care Act. I mean, I hope that it sounds like Mr. Lewis says, it's still a work in progress, give it some time to work, where Mr. Zinke was saying this isn't doing what it should exactly, plus it's hurting small businesses, which is kind of the opposite of what you heard from Mr. Lewis, so there's clearly a contrast there. I do like his comparison at the end where he said one of them's the show horse and one of them's the workhorse, and I think that really kind of came out in this debate, and I'd be curious what you thought about the answers
those
to the
cliches
Obama.
work because they got a good response here?
I think those cliches are important, and in fact, I think John Lewis, in a lot of ways, demonstrated some strength in the area of really specific knowledge of a lot of this legislation and ideas out there. Not that Ryan Zinke didn't. Ryan Zinke did at times, but I think specifically on the issue of health care. He threw out some ideas, but he didn't take a very clear stance other than let's abandon this. But the thing that I noticed was interesting is he comes back and says, well, the pre-existing condition thing is fine. Now here's the problem. If you look at the way the bill is written, the stuff that people like, the pre-existing condition to keep your kids on your health care plan to the age of 26, those types of things. Well, you can't have those and not have the mandate because then the thing can't be funded. So if you throw out the rest of it and then keep those things, it's going to blow up. So while there were some ideas thrown out there, Ryan Zinke didn't take a clear stance on it. So in that sense, I think in that debate, Lewis looked a little sharper in talking about those issues. Now, the other thing that was talked about a lot that was right is whether or not he authored the plan. And of course, if you know anything about state directors, they don't author legislation. That's not what they do.
Well, it's a work in progress. We're trying to throw this together. On the Affordable Care Act, they seem to be both a little uncomfortable when pressed on it. And as you said, Ryan Zinke wants to take part of it that he likes and throw away part of it. But aren't we too far down the road on this thing? This was sold to the American public as a 10-year plan. The president came out today and said maybe no one really likes it that much, but it's saving each family as much as $1,800 a year in holding inflation costs for health care down. Did any of them, either one of them, make any headway with voters on this issue tonight?
I think it's a nettlesome issue because I think when you talk about it in terms of Obamacare, people don't like it. When you talk about specifics, people tend to like it. The one thing that was danced around in this debate, and Ryan Zinke mentioned it briefly, was a discussion about Obamacare and Medicare, and the suggestion that what's going to happen here with the plan in place, that you're going to see rising costs for home health insurance for older folks here in Montana. And that's the issue about the $716 billion that supposedly is cut from Medicare. Right. And you know what? It depends on how you look at that, and there's a great debate about that, but there's both the Ryan plan and Obamacare actually rely upon those cuts in order to carry out the missions that they want to carry out. So the whole context was not actually there in the debate.
Donna.
When we talked about the ads, and Ryan Zinke explained his leadership one and the points that he was trying to make there. Did he make some points there without, some people were offended because they said that John Lewis couldn't help his age. But Ryan Zinke clearly says, I was leading, I was in the military, and I have this experience.
I think Zinke's strongest time in the debate was talking about not only that experience, because he did a good job of it, not just talking about I'm a Navy SEAL, but all the pieces of that. So that record and that resume is very, very impressive when you kind of talk about that. The other thing that I think is important about Ryan Zinke is one of the things about Ryan Zinke is he can come off as dour and serious. And to some extent, that could be good, but sometimes it can be scary. He smiled a good amount tonight, and actually I think that made him look a bit more approachable, and I think that was good.
I thought that both of them had some real good points of super good personality and making points, political as some of them may be, but also the personal ones. I thought they showed, both of them, a lot of personality.
They both showed their humor. And that's something I think people don't appreciate. They want this likability. I think in a lot of ways, if you kind of look at John Lewis, I think comes off as very likable. I think Ryan Zinke came off more likable than I've seen him in public venues before. And so I think in that sense, I think Montanans have some good folks. And I actually think, generally speaking, I thought they both acquitted themselves well.
What do you think about John Lewis's response that I want to move forward? It's not just about my resume. It's about taking Montana into the future.
The vision.
The vision.
Yeah, and I thought that was strong. Now the problem with John Lewis is that a lot of his experience is, of course, only in working on the staff of a U.S. senator, right? And a U.S. senator that may not necessarily be popular right now, and of a party that's not very popular. So that's an asset for him because that's why he knows all the things that he knows and has this intricate experience. However, that's also a detraction. So he does need to say he needs to move forward. And certainly in terms of the specificity of some of the things he was talking about, it shows that he is thoughtful, and it shows that he has some ideas. And I think that definitely came out throughout the debate. I mean, the Social Security example was great. He actually did something that I hadn't seen before, where he actually said, I have an idea to fix this plan. And that was good, as opposed to just trying to preserve it and save it. He actually mentioned something specific, and I thought that was a strong suit.
And you mentioned that and kind of touched on that of Lewis's background, but how much of a problem is the Obama administration for John Lewis?
Very clearly, a problem for all Democrats in this cycle is you have the administration that's not popular nationally and really not popular. I think the latest number I saw was 35% approval rating for Barack Obama here in Montana. And you notice the closing phrase, the closing lines of Ryan Zinke, right?
Really
He's a vote
at home
for Barack Obama, and I'm not. And now, I think that's obviously an oversimplification, but that's exactly what Zinke wants to do. He wants to basically make voters go in there and say, yeah, I don't like Barack Obama, I'm going to vote for Ryan Zinke.
What about that, though? You know, I mean, the Republican folks who are behind Zinke are going to vote for him no matter what. The Democrat folks who are behind John Lewis are going to vote for him no matter what. So really, you have to appeal to the independent voters.
And independent voters in the state are not terribly excited about Barack Obama. That's one thing. And I would take mild issue with that. And you look back in 2012, 95% of Democratic voters that showed up voted for John Tester. 89% of Republican voters voted for Denny Rehberg. So there is some ability to peel off some of those voters, some of them. And I think John Lewis, to win, has got to have his base. He's got to pull independents, which is what John Tester does. He's got to pull some Republicans, too.
Do you know which of the two of them or independents are leaning toward at all? Have you seen anything on that?
The polling has been very sparse.
Pretty
so
crusty.
It's really, really hard.
Yeah, pretty old from what
But I
we've
can tell you,
seen.
here's what I can tell you. In the 2012 election, John Tester won about 9-10 points among independents, if I recall off the top of my head, 95% of his base, and peeled off some Republicans, and he still only won by 3.4 points. So that tells you that the path forward is very similar for John Lewis. He's got to make sure his independents go for him.
So strategically speaking, you're the campaign manager for either of these candidates. People have just seen this debate. Let's hope they watch it and take notes. What do you do to win this election now? I mean, what's the next step that we're going to see from these two candidates, either through more campaign ads or out on the trail? What do they need to do?
I think John Lewis, what he wants to do is, in a sense, take a page from John Tester. He's likable, he's approachable, he looks like he's a solution solver. And that's what I think that's what helped John Tester a lot in that election. I think with Ryan Zinke, I think you see he goes back to that language about being an American first in his resume, which resonates with veterans and that might vote for him regardless of their party. But the other thing is, notice that discussion about foreign policy. He knows foreign policy really well and comes off very, very strongly. And if that issue emerges and continues to emerge, that's only going to help Ryan Zinke, especially among independents, who might be a little bit concerned about world affairs. And because they look at him and see somebody that can speak with a voice of experience. And I think that can help him a lot.
We did spend quite a bit of time right off the bat with Donna's question about ISIS and Leon Panetta's new book. And I tried to get him nailed down on how we're going to pay for this war. Is it going to be another credit card war like the last two? How do you think either one of them did on that?
That's an area of weakness I would pin with both of them, in the sense that we can talk about war. Ryan Zinke's general answer is we need to grow the economy, and that's how we're going to pay for it. And I didn't really see exactly what John Lewis was suggesting, other than he's cautious about doesn't get involved. And that's a problem. I mean, we're going to a war where we need more money, and certainly World War II, we had all kinds of sacrifices, and I didn't hear anyone calling for any sacrifices. And that's crazy, especially with our debt and deficit as is right now.
And I didn't think the answer was very clear on putting boots on the ground either.
That neither one was really. No, Ryan Zinke didn't come out and say that he would do that, and Lewis, I think...
He said he would talk about it, I think. And
Lewis said he wanted at least Congress to vote on it and to authorize force that the Congress be brought into the equation, which really hasn't been the case in the last few years.
Right.
So I guess the voters will have their final say on that and how they did. What else jumped out at you tonight? We asked right off the bat a question about the do-nothing Congress and approval rating somewhere between 8 or 9%.
Were you going to say that journalists have a little
Journalists
bit
have a 16% approval rating. Yay! Twice as good as Congress.
All right.
That's not saying much.
It was all kinds of great stuff that I saw that was going back and forth.
How about, did you hear anything more on the personality of the two? They did kind of loosen up a little bit, and when John Lewis talked about being a soccer coach, and Zinke talked about his family comes first.
Assistant coach.
Yeah, and what his wife went through when they were all deployed. And
Absolutely.
I think you can't underestimate the importance of the personality and making that connection with Montana voters. Certainly, we like candidates that have personality, and there's definitely evidence from elections past that people are willing to cross party lines to vote for a candidate they like more. So I think to some extent, Zinke had to come into this debate more so than he has in the past to show some personality, and I definitely think he succeeded in that because I think because he's older, because he can come across more serious, I think there might be a little hesitation, but I think some of that blossomed tonight, and I think that was good. John Lewis, I think his asset all along has been, how can you not like him? He comes off as earnest, and I think he came off as earnest in this particular debate, for sure.
Since his wife is the soccer coach and he's the assistant coach.
I mean, humor is important, and certainly if you go back to 2012, in a lot of measures, Denny Reberg has a lot of strong assets, but in terms of the personality, John Tester was able to paint, a better picture of him and come off better in, televised interactions, and that did not go unnoticed, and you saw this actually in the polls. So I wish I had polls to talk about here to actually assess this more, but we really don't, other than some polls that are done by some dubious organizations.
One thing both campaigns might be doing now is cutting some new ads. Did we trash their current ads enough that they might go rethink what they're saying? We tried to challenge them both on some of the mis or half-truths involved in their ads.
Well, I think the very end where we talked about the environment and global warming, that line that Zinke made there, might show up in an ad perhaps, but also I think the line about the Ryan budget, again, might show up in a particular ad. You might see that. I didn't necessarily see anything that leapt out at me that hurts John Lewis. Maybe you guys in the panel might have seen, but I didn't see anything. Did you guys see anything that might have
No, I
left out
thought
of you?
both really, being undecided, listening to them both, I think they both had a lot of information to offer Montana voters. So I think this was very worthy, and it helped introduce people more who may not have known John Lewis and who didn't know Ryan Zinke. So if nothing else, I hope this engages more Montana viewers, or voters rather, to say, oh, okay, well, that's who that is, and that's what he stands for, to help them maybe do more research.
And it's not just political ads.
Yeah.
The only one moment that now I've thought about it a little bit more, the only one moment that maybe John Lewis might regret having said something is, notice he said, I wrote some legislation. And, that could be used as a line to kind of go back and clip in terms of the Obama, discussion, which, of course, Zinke wants to lay on his shoulders and so on and so forth. So there's perhaps that. I think he might have said, I was responsible or helped write this specific piece of legislation, and that might have been a better response.
But Jay made it very clear that he did not write the Affordable Care Act.
So maybe you'll be in an ad.
Wouldn't be the first time.
That's increasingly.
Won't be the last time. So I guess one question I have is, and I'll throw it to everybody, do you feel you got a better sense of the two candidates
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
after listening and watching this debate tonight compared to just the staged ads that we've seen so far? How about you, Dave?
Absolutely. You got to think about this from the candidate's perspective. The candidate wants to tell a story, and they want to tell it in a very particular way, right? They want to frame it in a very, very particular way. And, of course, that means there's context missing. I think what this debate helped do is bring a lot of the context in the equation to help us understand them a bit better. And they were pressed on several different fronts to go beyond those advertisements. And that conversation absolutely has to happen for voters. Now, one of the problems is, of course, a lot of voters, when they watch this debate, they're going to see what they want to see through their partisan lenses, right? Sure enough, I guarantee you right now, the Republican Party is saying Ryan Zinke won the debate. The Democratic Party is saying John Lewis won the debate. But you know what? Democratic identifiers believe that. Republican identifiers believe that. The tricky part are the independents. The independents are the ones that tend not to pay attention. So they're only going to pick up pieces here and there. I think an independent voter who seriously watched this, I think, learned a lot about the candidates.
I think it's really tough to get them off of their talking points
Yes.
and off of debate coaching. And I think, but the point that you say too is that they want to get their points across and what they stand for. And I think there were some glimmers, though, that we could get them off of that tonight.
And not only that, you have to understand that they're also speaking to audiences that might just be tuning in. So they want to repeat the talking points that maybe all of us have heard a lot. But somebody else tuning in for the first time has not. So you're right. It is hard to pull them off. It's our job to try to do that.
Jill, we get bombarded with these press releases every day, 4 or 5 for each campaign, in triplicate, duplicate. Do you feel you have a better sense of who these two gentlemen are than just reading all their rhetoric?
I do, yeah, I do. And so I think this was really valuable in comparing this debate with the first one in Billings. And granted, that was radio, and was that not their first debate? I think I heard more in that debate of their talking points. Regardless of what the question was, they answered however they wanted to, even if it was off topic, wildly off topic. And I didn't hear as much talk of the trident, and the things that like Zinke would say and what Lewis would say. They felt like they started to get a little more natural and engaged with each other and be more genuine, I think. And that could just be a function of, it's time now just to no holes barred. Get in there and do the debate, say what you have to say. They're more comfortable. Time's running out, so go for it.
How about you?
It was nice to see their faces, their posturing, their response to each other when the other was speaking. So I think that will help viewers, voters, make a decision and get the feel for their candidates.
We've got a couple minutes left just to give us some idea of what our time frame is. Dave?
Couple quick points. Number one, John Lewis, you have to realize, has never run for elected office before. So to some extent, the stakes are a lot higher. I mean, these are his first debates he's ever done. And so, if someone had more to gain, it might have been him. I mean, at least Ryan Zinke has run for office and stuff like that before, and I think he acquitted himself well. The second thing, though, is I still don't know what the issue is with the out-of-state money. In other words, what's Ryan Zinke going to do because he's in the pocket of these out-of-state interests? I'm still wanting to know exactly what that is, and haven't figured that out yet, and I don't think we have an answer to that in this debate.
Maybe you can write a book about that. Your new book's coming out shortly, isn't it?
It is, October 21.
And that's about the Tester Reber campaign,
Battle
right?
for the Big Sky, that's right.
All right. They're telling me we need to wrap it up. Panel, you did an awesome job tonight. Thank you so much for helping.
Thank
you. Helping our voters and viewers understand this campaign a little bit. They're telling me we have 1 minute, but your final thoughts as we move forward. They already asked you, what are these campaigns? Are they circling the wagons right now? We've got a month to go.
We've got a month to go. What you're going to see is advertisements are going to step up. Sorry, everyone, but you're going to see a lot more of them. They're going to be out there furiously talking to people out there, running to the very last minute to try to get as many voters. You're also going to get more phone calls, folks. So sorry about that as well. But there's going to be a lot more people knocking your door, talking. And actually, I think that's great. That's what we need in democracy.
And when might we see some polls? I guess the polls, after last election, the polls were so off that we don't want to see.
House races aren't as polled as much as Senate races, and neither race has given me their polls, despite my desperate attempts to beg them for them.
Of course, the only poll that really matters is the one coming up in November.
That's right.
Hey, thank you all for being with us here on Montana PBS as we analyze this House debate here from Bozeman tonight. Thanks for joining us, and do vote, won't you? So that was the analysis after the debate on Saturday night. David Parker, we want to thank him for joining us and our panel of MTN journalists. A reminder, coming up on the 20th of October, the MTN Network will also feature the Senate debate between Steve Daines and Amanda Curtis. That's coming up on Monday night, October 20th from Billings. We want to thank you for joining us this morning on Face the State, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for watching Face the State. This has been a presentation of Montana's news station. Fair, accurate, to the point.